Everybody to the Resilient Minds podcast. I'm grateful here today because we are spending time with a very incredible, eloquent, expressive gentleman. Is Giacomo Zucco. Am I pronouncing your name right, brother?
Just the accent is Giacomo, which is the Italian
Yeah.
equivalent of James, basically, or Jacques, Iago, Giacomo.
Giacomo. So Giacomo, I had the pleasure of connecting. Well, really, we kind of got to know each other through a friend. However, Emmanuel, shout out to Emmanuel. And but I watched this beautiful man share his heart, his spirit, his true integrity, and his soul, really what he stands for out on stage and Bitcoin Atlantis. And the way that he presents himself, you can feel the level of integrity and alignment in his being. So, brother, can you share just a little bit about yourself? You know, how long you've been in the space, a little bit more about your magic and what you're currently doing in the world.
Sure. So I come from a very traditional field. I was studying theoretical physics, and then I started to work for a multinational company, Accenture, in traditional payments. So it was a very fiat job, as we will call you right now as a Bitcoiners. Very fiat job, very normal. But then in 2000, at the end of 2012, I started to get in contact with Bitcoin in very strange ways because Bitcoin was basically stalking me and following me around. Basically, I was working in Accenture in payments, and I started to hear about Bitcoin as a possible payment technology. But that was just it, the technology. 1 week after, I was in a group with some people that were protesting outside of the embassy in London, where Julian Assange was captive already back then in 2012. And this group was still talking on, I think it was WhatsApp or something, and they started to talk about Bitcoin as this kind of privacy money that you can also use to donate to WikiLeaks because they take away the other ways to donate to WikiLeaks. So these two topics, they have nothing in common. Like my work colleagues, they knew nothing about Assange. They care nothing. It was just my thing to work there and be in that group. And then I was in a group translating some Mises.org, von Mises Institute articles of it, Austrian Schools of Economics in Italian. And these people were not interested in WikiLeaks or Assange or privacy or activism. They were usually gold bugs, people interested in gold, sun money, inflation, macroeconomic things, nothing about activism or privacy or whatever. So I started to, and they started, and I started to read there about Bitcoin as a new gold standard, as a new way to fight the central bank distortive incentives. So from three areas of my life, spheres of my life that I consider completely non-overlapping except for me, Bitcoin started to follow me all around. And that was in the course of 3 weeks. So basically I became obsessed about Bitcoin. I could not work anymore. I could not think about anything else. And a few months, this was December 2012, January 2013. And a few months later, in May 2013, my wife, Mir, she's also an expert of multi-potential lifestyle. So she follows a lot of tricks and hacks how to integrate different kind of passions. And she told me, you should quit your job. This stuff, Bitcoin, you're talking about Bitcoin all the time. You want to have a job in technology, and Bitcoin is technology. You feel like you want to be an activist on social ideal causes, and Bitcoin is a social ideal causes. So she told me, just go and do it. So I did. I quit my job, my fiat job, and I tried to do Bitcoin startups for all 2013. Most of them were cosmic level bullshit. I mean, I didn't understand anything back then. I created so many useless businesses back then. Most of them failed, at least not scamming anybody, but they failed bad, most of them. A few survived, like a wallet that you can still use today. It's called Blockstream Green. I was the first employee of the second employee actually of the company Green Address back in 2013. So some of those companies made it. Some I closed them until in 2015. I realized that what I was doing was making money just consulting banks and consulting companies and insurances. So big fiat companies were paying me to teach them about Bitcoin. And I was using most of the money, except for providing for our family, I was using most of the money to keep alive Bitcoin startups with zero reliable business models and revenue models. So I decided to make this a business model. So I created the research center that was basically hosting for free the most important and the most brilliant Bitcoin developers from all around the world. And the only thing that I asked in exchange was knowledge. Teach me, give me knowledge, explain me, correct me, tell me what you do. Then I had my employees helping these guys in any way, logistically, technically, legally, in any way, extracting the information, packaging the information, and reselling it to the fiat world, basically. And this lasted for 4 beautiful years. But then we had our first baby, our first daughter. So I closed down the laboratory and I stayed Bitcoin freelance for a couple of years. I am a very, very small investor in some Bitcoin companies like Rely, Ocean, Xsets. I'm an advisor to bring. So I did small things, and then finally they trapped me again into doing something as a director. So now, starting from the last October, I'm the director of the Plan B network, planb.network, which is basically a project to aggregate and systematize all the Bitcoin education, which is all around the world, which is great, but it's very scattered around, very redundant. Everybody's trying to reinvent the wheel with the new Bitcoin 101. So what I try to do is try to systematize, reorganize, integrate other people's work in education, and also to integrate at the same level Bitcoin geographical hotspots, because I think that the core of education is, I mean, you can do e-learning is great. And what we are doing now is great. What you are doing with the viewers is great. But physical meetings have a kind of bandwidth that is impossible to replace yet, at least. So we need also physical locations where people can meet, work together. And that was a game changer for me, to have this place in Milan for 4 years, where I was really at the same table with the best Bitcoin developers and researchers. So I'm also trying to go, let's say, the little bit real estate part. Like it's startuppers like to always do these stupid comparison games. So it's a little bit like a Bitcoin version of Khan Academy meeting Bitcoin version of Booking.com or Airbnb.
I love it, brother. And so, before we go deeper, because I'd love to know. So, Plan B Network is really focused on making sure that the network that we're building globally, infrastructure wise, is not duplicating itself. Is that what I'm hearing?
Especially in the education part and in the management of physical places. I mean, if I spent a lot of effort personally to also work on technical infrastructure, technical specifications, in order not to have redundancies. You know, the famous XKCD joke, in which you have 46 competing standards, so you create a committee to unify it, and now you have 47 competing standards. So I did that for technical things, but I still do. I participate to the LSP standard group, specification group. I participate still with the LMPBP Foundation with many standards. But this Plan B network is mostly about education. Many good Bitcoiners all around the world, they want to do education. Let's say somebody in Africa is going to create this Bitcoin center to educate Benin people. The problem is that they will write from scratch a Bitcoin 101 course, and they will see what works and what not doesn't. But we did that already for 100 times, so it doesn't make sense for you to reinvent the wheel again. I will just ship to you an educational package. You can customize it, you can localize it, but I will connect you with the best speakers already. I know the sponsor, so we basically try to connect students, teachers, sponsors in an effective market. The revenue model is basically nothing more than the typical commercial network, in which I connect demand and offer of education, and I eventually will take a fee. Plus, I do some courses myself, so I also put myself as a producer, as a maker of some of this knowledge.
Amazing, man. I love it. And so tell us a little bit about the back story of like the traditional physics side of it, and how do you see that those physics kind of aligning with Bitcoin? Because I've heard so many times, Bitcoin is nature, Bitcoin is physics, Bitcoin is energy. So maybe we can help that illuminated approach for anybody that doesn't understand what that might mean, especially coming from this traditional physics background that you have.
So, as a physics nerd, I actually take issues with most of the metaphors that are being used. They are very effective. Like when Michael Saylor says Bitcoin is a battery, is a wall of encrypted energy or something like that. It's very poetic. He basically transmits an idea that I think it's effective for his targets, which is basically corporate investors and people like that. For me, as a physics nerd, that's a little bit disturbing because there are very specific meanings of the words. So Bitcoin is very, very interesting from a physical point of view. The main data structure of Bitcoin, the very famous blockchain, now it is a buzzword, it is used for everything. But in Bitcoin, the blockchain is a very clear data structure with these blocks that grows. There is a paper actually
We call
that
it time chain, right? For us,
right,
it's time
right.
chain.
Very good. Very, very
Yeah.
good. Satoshi Nakamoto called it, never called it blockchain. He called it time chain in the code and proof of work chain in the white paper. The term blockchain, since it is made of blocks, started to evolve later after Satoshi had led the project, and it started to be used as a umbrella buzzword to put everything together. So time chain is actually very, very good. And there is a mathematician that basically discovers something, which this is just one example of many, that basically if you use the block height, so the number of blocks as the equivalent of time, and use the total cumulative proof of work as the equivalent of energy, you can rebuild something which is fundamental in physics, which is the time energy non-commutation relationship by Heisenberg. So sounds like something super complex, but the idea is that the more you know the energy of some process, the less you know how long the process lasts, and the more you know the time of the process, the less you know the energy involved. This is true, for example, also if you look at waves, any kind of waves. If you know the frequency, think about if you have drums. If you just make it one sound of hitting the drum, that sound will have a very clear position in time because it's like tuck and then it's over. But you cannot tell the frequency. The frequency is a mess. There is not a clear frequency. On the other side, if you play a violin, you can have a a frequency which is almost pure, but there is no precise, like the time is very long. You cannot make it in 1 second. It must last. So there is this relationship, this complicated relationship between time and energy, and Bitcoin replicates that with proof of work. And then there are other things, like there is a brilliant German guy that made a speech about connecting Bitcoin with the paradox of black hole entropy. That's also another topic that seems incredibly complex, but these are not jokes. Like there is something, because Bitcoin is at the epicenter of many fundamental things. One of them being the technological structure of Bitcoin is an attempt to recreate a time change, so a time rule, a time clock, in a distributed way, in a decentralized way, without any kind of central authority. So this seems like something super niche, super specific, but it's something very universal. It's a way to create a decentralized clock that nobody can control. It's not a very precise clock, but it's a very neutral clock that nobody can take over. So this has a lot of consequences in physics, actually. And then on top of that, you have cryptography. Cryptography is all about deep mathematical concepts and physical concepts like computational reducibility and entropy. So when you create a wallet, when you create a Bitcoin wallet, you will create your seed phrases, your secret phrases, the secret 12 words to keep your Bitcoin. And usually what we try to measure is how much entropy, which means how much randomness you have in order to create really random words. Otherwise, people can guess them. So entropy is a strong thermodynamical concept. Boltzmann, physics is all about entropy. But so many things. The connection are endless, and some of us, there is a small subgroup of physics nerd inside Bitcoin that are having a lot of fun to create the connection.
And by the way, I was listening to a few of you on stage at Bitcoin Atlantis, and I was in awe of the depth and layering that you were all discussing in such a beautiful way, because to me, it sounded like poetry. and that the level of depth that you guys were talking, I don't know if most people can understand it. However, I do feel that it's so important to bring that to the forefront, to literally hear you guys speak and hear you guys communicate at that high of a level, because with that level of focus and detail, because it gives an awareness of the soundness of what is happening from a different map of the world. And I think that a lot of people, they don't hear these conversations out loud. And for me, it was like it was exciting to listen, because it's important that people recognize that, hold on, there's brilliant minds that are essentially, physicists, rocket scientists, people that are really developing the ground level components of this, to make sure that this is not just a theory or an idea. This is something that has been sound, developed, and is evolving with some of the soundest and most brilliant minds in the planet.
I agree. Not just brilliant, but what you find in Bitcoin, echoing my first, echoing the tale of my first encounter with Bitcoin encounters. What you find in Bitcoin is really what my wife would call the multidisciplinarity, multipotentiality. So you can find people embracing very different fields. Bitcoin is not one specialty. If you One of the things that we notice that we have many good Bitcoin developers, great Bitcoin developers, and when they write code, they are great. But when they talk about economics, they don't get it. Some of them, not all, but some of them, they don't get it. They maybe have been trained as a Keynesian, so they don't understand saving. They just fixate on spending, or they don't understand the Schelling points for which a fixed set of rule is more important than the specific rule that you choose. The fact that you cannot change the rules is more important than the rule. So they want to change the protocol continuously. And these are developers that are great in their field, but they don't grasp economics. Now you have investors that get the value proposition of the investment, but by being completely unaware of the technical part, they may expect unrealistic trade-off from the technology. They don't understand the pain point. They don't understand why we don't go in some direction. Why is not everything possible? And then you have both, that they can, maybe somebody can understand the financial point of view, the speculative point of view, and the technical. But if you don't have some kind of idealistic basically drive, then you don't understand why people are actually joining Bitcoin, not just as a tool, but also as some kind of idealistic movement. So you have to have all of them.
I would even call it a responsibility, or like a responsibility to oneself. If you don't have a ambition or a way of being that is more than greater than yourself, then you will not understand Bitcoin. Because it's not about any of us. It's about so much bigger than all of us. And I think that that's what makes it so profound and so powerful from my perspective, is because it's not about it's not about you or me. It's about sovereignty, genuine sovereign connection, and allowing people to break free from a hypnosis or a system that they don't even know they're a slave to yet. And so I think this is where our collective responsibility, by us discovering this, is like, how do we serve in that level of congruence that is so much more greater? And going back to the economics of it, is like, economic prosperity of the people is what defines the economic prosperity of us all. And so if people are not doing well, and people are not emphasizing their best passions, desires, their multidisciplinary focus, like your wife is helping and has helped you, by the way. And so it doesn't bring out this true nature, this true passion. And so I think that this is something that we get to integrate. And what I'm seeing with Bitcoin is a lot of people are integrating their passions, their sovereignty, their responsibility. And it's our duty now to bridge that economic prosperity from the old standard, the bullshit standard, the corrupt standard, to now a new golden standard. And so my question to you, bro, as we do this, or as we are really part of the forefront of this emphasis, how do you see now, so traditional businesses, traditional banking, traditional finance, transitioning or bringing that level of standard now into this new infrastructure, or helping them, guiding them, help building it alongside them into the new golden standard, into the new economic paradigm, into the new digital economy, and what we're here to really uphold with those levels of standards and values.
So we'll probably subdivide this category of traditional businesses into at least three steps. One is
Yep.
businesses that are not strictly connected with the monetary engineering, with the advanced financial engineering. So they are just providing some good or services, and they're just using money for three reasons: get paid by clients, store money for the future, so make a budget for the future, and pay providers and basically paying the services, the raw materials coming in. If you are one of these companies, then the integration of Bitcoin, even with many challenges, is, at least theoretically speaking, is kind of trivial. So from the point of view of being paid by clients, Bitcoin gives you access potentially and optionally. So if you want, you can still accept fiat, but you can also accept people paying you from all the world, including the majority of people on this planet are underbanked. It means that they don't have access to traditional finance, and they don't have access to global internet-based commerce. Why? Because they don't have a KYC AML identity, which is very expensive to maintain. So if what they provide as a value is positive, but is lower than the cost of this KYC bureaucracy, they are completely excluded. So if you sell for Bitcoin, you can access a market which is still small, actually, but is global and growing and untappable with anything else. This is not new. I remember businesses already in 2013, especially some kind of businesses, not all, of course, but businesses. I remember in Italy, 2013, an e-commerce just selling electronics, and they had all these Indian guys paying Bitcoin for the simple reason that payment from India to Italy from Swiss was inefficient, and with Bitcoin it was better. So a simple choice of accepting a payment. They didn't have to integrate Bitcoin at any very deep level. They just needed to accept Bitcoin payment. Now, this is not trivial, because now you have to be able to accept also small payment. So you have to integrate the Lightning Network. So you have to be able to understand how to integrate Bitcoin in different ways. But it's something that, theoretically speaking, is very trivial. The second point would be storing your wealth. Even if you don't receive money in Bitcoin, so you are not having any Bitcoin clients, still, if you store your wealth in Bitcoin, you are basically fighting inflation and fighting. You are not forced. Many people under the fiat clown world, many people are forced to transform from savers to speculative investors, because if they keep the money in the bank account as cash, this cash will be devaluated brutally. And they say it's like 8% now, 7%, but of course it's more, because the real inflation is not the CPI. The CPI is a joke. The real inflation must include all the markets that are directly impacted by the new money printing, which is healthcare, education, military, and of course stock market itself. The prices of stock market are going up because of inflation. So if you are a company and you don't want to suffer inflation so much, but you don't want to just try to invest in any kind of bullshit elevator pitch that you come into because you're desperate to find some place to save your money, Bitcoin is something, even in this case, is not simple. So I don't want to oversell the simplicity of it, because, for example, the volatility of Bitcoin is such that if you can afford a long time horizon of saving, let's say more than 4 years, then it's a great store of value, the greatest. I mean, you have no problem. If you receive Bitcoin and store Bitcoin, or if you receive fiat and you change in Bitcoin, you keep Bitcoin, and you have a time horizon in which you don't need liquidity for more than 4 years, you are in a very good position. But if you need short-term stability, like if you're going to receive the money now and you have to pay your providers in 1 week, and you cannot afford to be $1 below, then the volatility of Bitcoin will be very, very challenging. But still, many like Michael Saylor, Orange Pill, a lot of public companies to keep part of the treasury in Bitcoin. Even if you don't want to keep everything in Bitcoin, if you just keep something in Bitcoin, you are keeping something in an asset which is decorrelated from your stocks and your bonds and your fiat cash and your real estate and your other commodities. Being decorrelated, it will lower the overall risk of the portfolio. So it's already a good move just to have it a component. Plus, the one part of the Bitcoin saving is fighting inflation. The other part is fighting confiscation. If you are in a low interest rate regime with a lot of money printing, then you will have inflation. But at least the economy will be pumped. But if now you are in the crunch in which the interest rates are exploding and everything is collapsing, now you don't have a problem of inflation anymore. Maybe you even have deflation, but now you have a problem of confiscation, mass confiscation of businesses that happen in many, many places, many times. Treasuries of business being completely confiscated by the government. With Bitcoin, of course, you can still be persuaded to give it away by guns, with guns, but yeah, there is this saying that possession is half of property. Like when you have the control, maybe you can still be convinced with the good cop or the bad cop can still convince you to give it away, but now it's on you. While with a bank account, it's not on you. If somebody else decides that your company treasury must be confiscated because there is a national emergency, a war, global warming, the pandemics, whatever, click confiscated. With Bitcoin, you are physically the only one with the key, with the knowledge to move it. If you refuse, they cannot. That's a power that many people, many entrepreneurs don't even remember this power anymore. Maybe they know that they have the key to the real estate, but they don't even remember anymore how it was to be the sole controller of the wealth of the industry. You still have to manage if the government is coming to confiscate and you say no, maybe they take something else. So it's still not trivial, but it's unlocking a power which is incredible. And then there is the last phase, which is paying your providers, which is also something that people don't consider, but is not always necessary or interesting. But for some businesses, it is. I have a client in Italy which is importing saffron from Iran. He has all the needed permissions to bypass all the political like sanctions. So he is fully regulated. He can, and the plane full of saffron will arrive from Iran to Milan without any problem. But now he will have to pay the provider, and he can't because no payment from a bank will pass through that. And 1 year ago, almost now, this point is 2 years ago, this guy started to just say, okay, I buy Bitcoin, I sell Bitcoin. It was already legal, but it was basically not permitted by practically. So now he can. So these kind of businesses, including public companies like the companies adopting Bitcoin treasury like Tesla, or many other big companies are using Bitcoin as part of treasury, they can do it easily. With banking, with financial services, that's a little bit more complicated because most of the advantages that we described right now were about disintermediating financial, or partially or totally disintermediating financial intermediaries. So when you do that, if your job is to be a financial intermediary, you're basically entering a game of self disintermediation in a way. So how can you provide a service based on a tool that is made in order to disintermediate your kind of services, at least partially? That doesn't mean that there is no room for a bank in Bitcoin, for example. There is. For example, many people, they don't trust self-custody because yes, it gives you the power to resist confiscation, but maybe you in your risk assessment, which, I mean, risk assessment is individual. In your risk assessment, the confiscation scenario is way less probable that I fucked up my setup and lost my coin alone scenario. If that's the case, and then that may be the case, especially at the beginning, I would argue that the more you do it, the more you should learn and step out of that scenario and lower your risk of screwing up. But as long as that risk is higher than confiscation, you don't want to keep custody. You want somebody else specialized to keep custody. Or maybe you want to keep custody, but now you want to buy a house, you don't want to sell Bitcoin, so you want to loan, basically to get a loan in fiat based on your Bitcoin collateral, and you want to put it in a multi-sig. You need a financial institution for that, a new one or an old one, but it's a financial institution. And even normal Bitcoin functions like payment through the Lightning Network, they need management of liquidity. They need this kind of uh, financial kind of services, which can be provided by Bitcoin startups, but they can also be provided by traditional startups, traditional companies. I usually make an example. Many Bitcoin companies, well, not many, but a few Bitcoin companies provided Bitcoin ATMs. When a few years ago in Switzerland with a friend, we had an idea. So Bitcoin ATMs are great. You put the machine, you put the cash, and you get the Bitcoin. But why should we redeploy an entire batch of physical machines where we already have normal ATMs? So we made a deal with the Swiss federal train stations. They already had this kiosk, electronic kiosk, with a webcam and a screen and basically a cash input and a credit card input that was used to sell train tickets. With one single software update, we inserted the Bitcoin selling. So now you click Bitcoin selling, puff, the entire industry of Bitcoin ATM was disintermediated by an incumbent because the incumbent already had the infrastructure. Now that didn't work very well, in my opinion, because many reasons. The hardware was not great, the price was terrible, so nobody uses that. So it was a kind of a failure, one of the many failures of my ideas. But I'm still convinced that if like you want a Bitcoin exchange, now you have a competition between a new startups incorporated in the British Virgin Island or your traditional bank offering you to be the exchange. Who do you trust? You go to your bank. If banks were smart and responsive to the market, which they aren't because they are used to monopoly and they are completely captured by politics. But if they were smart businesses, they could completely reintermediate part of the business. Like, okay, Bitcoin is sovereign, but fiat is not. And all the wealth is now in fiat. If we are going to move to a Bitcoin standard, and we will, there is this migration from fiat to Bitcoin, and this migration needs financial intermediaries, official, unofficial, formal, informal, but they are needed, like the bridges between fiat and Bitcoin. Traditional financial institutions that like banks, they can position themselves as bridges, harvesting lots of fees to do that. So if I was a banker, I would be very careful to do that. Of course, it's a risky move because right now bankers are paid by the governments with inflation, but with the power to create inflation, to do two things. One is expanding the monetary base in order to devaluate the debt of the nation states. Two, to play the police. So instead of having the police catching the bad guys, you have the banks basically controlling everything via social engineering and censorship of payments. So you are paid to do that job, so you forget how to do your real job, that was protection of capital or reinvestment of capital, intermediation of capital. Many bankers, they don't know how to be bankers anymore. They are just cops basically right now. But they used to be bankers, and they should discover to be bankers with Bitcoin. Last point of my answer, which is the very sad one, I'm sorry. If you are not a commercial banker, but you are a central banker, then I think Bitcoin is really just created to disintermediate you. So there's not much. I mean, if you are a commercial banker, maybe you can rediscover how to be a banker with Bitcoin, uh, with a limited role, but still a role. If you are a central banker, the goal of Bitcoin is to make you obsolete. So sorry.
I love it. And you know, it's beautiful because I'm hearing like a lot of ways to integrate private credit, private equity, really unify and have these intermediaries for perhaps new investment vehicles and opportunities to invest into different businesses or real estate, right? And really transition those private equity vehicles or those real estate funds into the Bitcoin standard, into a standard that will actually be able to then take all of that funding or that traditional fiat currency and really purchase the Bitcoin to then go out there and build businesses, build the infrastructure, build the real estate on the Bitcoin standard. What are your thoughts on this type of intermediary, or is that something that really speaks to you when you hear me discuss that?
It speaks to me. I think it's a very interesting opportunity. There are also a lot of risks though, so I'm also very cautious because, for example, let's say you are an investment fund. Much of the job, so in theory, you can have a great investment fund on Bitcoin, helping the Bitcoin liquidity, or diversifying outside of Bitcoin into real estate or businesses or many other things, or managing Bitcoin loans or stuff like that. But the problem is that we have basically, well, three problems at least. First problem, most of the need in the modern society for financial intermediaries and real estate investment is caused by fiat money. So
Mhm.
we buy houses because we want to live in houses. And
Yep.
some of us buy houses because they want to specialize in real estate as a job. There may be project developers or builders or salesmen. But the reason that everybody with some wealth must also diversify in real estate is because money is broken. You have to save your money from inflation, and so you use real estate as a substitute for money because money is broken. If we fix money, I have a feeling that real estate, just to give you an example that you used, but also other asset classes, may re-demonetize, include like
Right.
modern art. Modern art is a way to escape inflation or taxation or both.
Right.
If you demonetize it, and because Bitcoin fixes the money, then you may see a shrinking of that kind of market back to the original use, which is still legit, but it's way more niche. So the first risk I see is that a Bitcoin standard will not be the same. Some of this market will probably disappear and be reincorporated into Harmony. The second problem is that Bitcoin is boring in the sense that, well, boring. It's too easy. So I'm a hedge fund provider. I realize that Bitcoin is the best performing asset ever in most time frames. And then I come to you and I say to you, okay, I'm a Bitcoin standard hedge fund. And you ask me, what do you do with my money? I buy Bitcoin and I keep it. And then yeah, I just keep it. So it's a good strategy. But your
Is that
suspicion at this point is, yeah,
I was just thinking, because that's where I think that the opportunity lies, is actually like, because I do hear like hold on for dear life and the hodling, right? But that's in terms of economics, right? It needs to be exchanged, right? To emphasize and build a more sound economy, we need to disperse it out there even more. And so that means taking in the old standard of fiat, right? Exchanging it for the Bitcoin standard, and then empowering, either paying our people, or paying our employees, or paying different people or different companies, so that it's exchanged even more in the world. And the more that it's exchanged, the more that it starts to become a medium of exchange, not a store of value anymore. So
true.
this is where I'm thinking is like, is it possible for us, instead of saying, hey, hodl, 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 get your business involved into the Bitcoin standard, and then help us build the infrastructure around the globe?
I think that the reason people are reluctant to spend Bitcoin is not about infrastructure. We can build better infrastructure for spending, and we will, and we are, because sometimes we have to spend, and we need that to be smooth and possible and private and efficient. But the real reluctance to spend Bitcoin, I think, is based on the fact that Bitcoin is undergoing a violent monetization phase. It's like what happened to gold in a few thousand years, from an aesthetic commodity that you just use for jewelry into the universal money of the planet. Now it's happening to Bitcoin just faster. Since that's happening faster to Bitcoin, it's not impossible to overperform Bitcoin with some kind of business of investment, but it's just very, very bloody hard. Since it's bloody hard, until you get to the end of the store of value, accretion and acquisition phase, it's not impossible to do medium of exchange, but it's always fighting against a very, very difficult force, which is the fact that Bitcoin is going up. And mm, like you can use Bitcoin to buy real estate, equity, but over a long enough time frame, let's say more than 4 years, you will not overperform. Even if you're a great entrepreneur, like think about, I did mining in my life. Like I did mining. I did a lot of things. I did companies. These companies, some of them performed very well in USD. Some of them performed very well in USDT terms. But if I compare them to just buying Bitcoin with that money and hodling, I will lose. That doesn't mean that we should never do anything, because human beings are not about staying there and staring at their wealth. They are about doing stuff, changing the world, adapting the world to your vision. So people will spend. But there is a natural tendency about hodling, which is not something due to poor spending infrastructure, but it's due to the price dynamics that for now are privileging Bitcoin. Let me give you another example. You are in Venezuela and you have a treasury with two things, some US dollars and some bolivars. Now you have to spend. You will spend bolivars. You will try to just spend bolivars. You will try to thesaurize the dollars because bolivars are going down and dollars are, relatively speaking, staying up. So you want to, that's called Gresham law or Thiers law. That happens under legal tender. But anyway, the point is that you want to spend the bad money first and to keep the good money for last. So when it is that you spend Bitcoin? When you're out of fiat. And not many companies, not many people are out of fiat yet. I know somebody who is. I cannot deny, I cannot confirm nor deny that I may be one of them. But if you're not one of these niche that is completely in Bitcoin 100%, then it makes sense to spend the other assets first and to keep Bitcoin spent for last. This is not because the payment infrastructure doesn't work or not because you are greedy, just because, and as long as you have other assets, you will spend other assets if you can. Sometimes you can't. That's why it's important that Bitcoin can be spent. For example, if you want to pay over the internet with privacy, because you're buying a VPN, because you want privacy, you don't want disclosure of your credit card information, then you have no choice. I have fiat, which is going down. I have Bitcoin, which is going up, but I want to pay with privacy. Well, no choice. I have to use Bitcoin. If I have to pay with clicks, oh, sorry, fiat is blocked. I will spend Bitcoin. I have to pay the Canadian truckers. I have to spend Bitcoin. I have to pay. I have to pay an employee in a sanctioned country in Russia. Well, it's just Bitcoin. So sometimes I do, or I have to pay and I am an unbanked because I have no access to the banking industry, as the majority of the people on this planet. I will use Bitcoin. But it's normal that many people will be reluctant to spend Bitcoin as long as it goes up. So I will not try to push the use case, at least, or if you push it, I will push the other way around. I will push people not to spend Bitcoin, but to do something more compatible with incentives, which is to accept Bitcoin. So when you get Bitcoin, you don't want to spend Bitcoin if you have fiat, but you do want to be paid in Bitcoin, even if you have fiat, because that's better for you. So pushing people to accept Bitcoin for the job, I think it's easier, encounters less resistance than pushing people to spend the Bitcoin, which is something they will do, but only after they're out of fiat, which for many people will take some time.
I love it because you actually just painted a really beautiful picture right now, brother. Is the most important thing to actually spend right now is the fiat in exchange to get the Bitcoin. And so
Yeah, exactly.
using that fiat to get the Bitcoin, once you get the Bitcoin and all your resources are transitioned into Bitcoin, then you could start using it as that monetary medium of exchange. And I
Yeah,
love it,
it's
bro, because you
basically,
really painted such a beautiful picture right here, right now. Is like it's yeah, of course, like accept the Bitcoin. Get curious about how you can use your fiat to be involved in building and creating inside of the Bitcoin economy, inside of the new economy. And then as a result, you can then, once all of your fiat is gone, you could start exchanging the Bitcoin in an even more empowered way because there's going to be way more people involved after you have let go of the fiat standard.
yeah,
Did I hear you right?
of course. Yeah, absolutely. There is two ways to reach a Bitcoin standard. One is globally. When we all reach the Bitcoin standard, the price doesn't go up anymore, and so now it would be just as well a medium of exchange, just as a store of value. But there is another phase, which is your personal reaching level of reaching the Bitcoin standard. So the world is still Bitcoin is still monetizing, but you are now 100% Bitcoin. So now you do spend because that's the only thing that you can do. So you will, and you will be happy to improve these payment rates. But yes, that doesn't, of course, that's not a religion. That's a meme. That's an heuristic, that is a slogan that we use. But of course, every time I'm at a Bitcoin conference, I spend Bitcoin just because Bitcoin, I just have Bitcoin. But even other people that have fiat, they will spend Bitcoin just to try, or just because it's cool, just to encourage the merchants. So it's also sometimes, even if I have some fiat, I want to spend Bitcoin because it's cooler. But that's not a sustainable incentive, in my opinion. Until I think that people should receive Bitcoin until they get in the Bitcoin standard, which is 100% exposure, which is a crazy place to be. Very, very. I mean, I don't encourage people that are not ready. This is like people doing crazy meditation or psychedelic trips. If you are not ready, don't do it, because being 100% Bitcoin is a hell of a ride. So volatility, you can see your full net worth going down 80% in 1 year, but then going up maybe 2,000% in the other year, but also going down. So it's something that you have to be ready for. But when you're there, then you would use Bitcoin as a medium of exchange because you have no other choice.
What do you suggest for people like right now, as we transition and we build the mining infrastructure as well, for investors that maybe want to store their wealth inside of these big mining infrastructures, that can be also a power generator from waste gas, or flare gas to power, that can then also mine Bitcoin, but in addition can create a lot of power for the grid. So that can be a really great transfer of energy, of wealth, or energy transition, as we like to call it, from the old to the new.
Yes, I think that if you already have energy infrastructure of some kind, if you have power plants, then mining should be really, really top priority to analyze for you. May not always be good, but in most occasion it is, because basically there is the demand from the grid is always inconsistent, is always unequal, uneven. So there are times in which it is not convenient to sell to the grid, but it's not convenient to shut down your power plant, depending on what it is. Of course, if it's nuclear, you can never shut it down, basically. But even if it's just carbon, it reaches coal, it reaches temperature, you cannot shut it down. If it's a river and not a dam, you cannot shut it down. There are many cases in which it's more expensive to shut it down than not. Solar or so, photovoltaic to a degree, wind power to a degree. There are many, 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 many cases. Every time there is this kind of waste of electricity or flaring, or when you have this waste of gas, or when you have there are many situations like this in Africa right now. You have a place with a good potential for free energy, extracting free energy from the environment, but you don't have anybody to sell it to in the near vicinity anymore, maybe because the population had disappeared from some zone of Africa. So now you're in Africa, you have a dam, you can generate power because power is there, but there's nobody to sell it to. People, you can sell it to people, but they're far away, and transportation of energy has a lot of dissipation, so it's not convenient. So before, you just had to close down the dam. Now you can open it up again just to mine Bitcoin. Bitcoin, in a way, I will use one of these physically incorrect metaphors, but Bitcoin is a way to teleport energy, basically, because you can, if you have energy, free energy in a volcano far away from the civilization, you cannot transport this energy. But now you can put a Bitcoin miner there. As long as you have a satellite connection, you can mine, and mining, you're basically, what you're doing is to turn energy into Bitcoin, lock for you, and for the rest of the planet, what you're doing is basically to change the economic pressure to miners, where basically you're changing the distribution of the incentives in order to reduce the production of energy elsewhere. In doing so, you are basically teleporting energy in a way. So if you already are into energy production or energy storage, mining is something to consider. If you can co-generate, that means that if you need heat for some reason, You may have some people are doing that with a spa service. Or you have to dry. There are people using Bitcoin ASICs to dry mango plants. So if you need heat, consistent heat, then Bitcoin mining can be used to co-generate. So you produce Bitcoin, and as a byproduct, you get heat, and you can use this heat for many applications. If you have to heat up a condominium in northern Sweden, Bitcoin mining can be something. This used not to be the case because up to until a few years ago, ASICs were the chips that we use for mining. They had such a short life cycle. They were obsolete so soon that it doesn't. You will never recover the investment in the chip, even if you do this. Right now, it's getting better. Right now, the chips are not obsoleted for 5, 6, 7 years. They are still usable because the technology is getting to a plateau of efficiency, basically. So now is the time in which you can use cogeneration. If you are not in these fields, mining is mostly used for as a research, as for, I mean, I know a lot of home miners that are not profitable in the sense that they are making money in fiat terms, but they're losing money in Bitcoin terms. If they just bought Bitcoin instead of buying the miner, they would be better off. But they are getting Bitcoin without a privacy, which is also a very important point. Like mining is a way to get Bitcoin privately with no KYC, no AML. It's also a way to extract money from a company. Even I know some companies that are doing, they are receiving an invoice from a data mining center, and the invoice says data center, and they are actually so they're spending 10K a month in data center, and they're receiving 10K equivalent of Bitcoin or 9.5 in a private Bitcoin wallet. Of course, I cannot confirm nor deny that this happens, but it may happen. That's actually one of the reasons that China blocked Bitcoin mining in China, which, by the way, is still happening. 30% of the hashing power is still illegally in China, so it's unstoppable. But one of the reasons they tried to stop it and they reduced it from 80% to 30% legally is that was exactly what Chinese people were doing for capital flight. You cannot send a bank wire outside. You cannot easily buy Bitcoin. So you pay for a Bitcoin miner. The Bitcoin miner will mine Bitcoin on your behalf and send you the Bitcoin that you will now send abroad. So it's a very important. It's very important for the grid, for sustainability. The miners are the energy buyers of last resource, where when nobody else wants energy, power, miners will want it. And when everybody else wants it, miners will not want it. They are stabilizers, and they are teleporters of energy from places where energy is possible to extract but not to use. They can use it, so it's good, but it's also good for capital arbitrage because it's basically a way to make fiat money disappear and enter in Bitcoin a private way. So you may like it, you may not like it, but that's the reality, and markets will find a way.
I even like it because it really transitions to energy arbitrage, right? Which
Yeah,
ultimately helps us distribute wherever we choose to, whether it's into the capital market with the power or the securing the network with the Bitcoin. And so I think that that's
yeah,
really neat to be able to have that credibility and support because then that secures the future for our next generation in a major way so that they can continue to thrive with sovereignty. And that's really what we're here for. So,
absolutely.
brother, before we go, I have a couple more questions, and I know we're
Sure.
right out of time. But
I
what
still
are
have
you?
some minutes, no problem.
Okay, cool, amazing. So, what do you see for with regards to the traditional finance in terms of how if somebody right now is in traditional finance is really recognizing all these ETFs happening in the market and they have no idea what Bitcoin stands for. Like, Roger Veer just got charged for tax fraud and people are like, "Oh my God, privacy and all these things." And they're thinking that Roger Veer is has something to do with BTC versus Bitcoin Cash. And then if you can just emphasize kind of the responsibilities of having this awareness, because there's a lot of noise out there in terms of privacy, traditional finance, Bitcoin.com, Bitcoin Cash. If you can kind of debunk all that shit right now, I'd be very grateful, brother.
The bank, all that shit right now will not be possible for a matter of
I
time,
know,
but we
but
can try to, we can try and make that the banking. So what you have to know if you come to Bitcoin is that this is something amazing. It's like a generation level, well, it could be a civilization level opportunity, but there is a lot of noise. Why? First, because it's a new thing. All the new things are surrounded by hype, buzzword, misconceptions, frauds. That's normal. Misdirections. So that's it for any novelty. And Bitcoin is still new. It's still very new. Two, as we said, Bitcoin is very multidisciplinary. So if you maybe know about finance, but you don't know about technology, you may be duped into buying some shitcoin because they will just tell you it's like Bitcoin, but it's more private, and you will believe it at the face value because you have no technological understanding. So be very wary of the claims. Everybody since the first altcoin are making crazy claims about altcoins. They're all false, basically, technically speaking. Three, this Bitcoin is touching interests, important interests like central banking. So you cannot expect an innovation that is touching important interests to not be surrounded by involuntary and voluntary misdirections and misconception and clouded environment. So so prepare to be very skeptical. And I'm not advocating for an open mind actually about Bitcoin. You should be as skeptical as you can, but just when you're skeptical, Bitcoin, if you take it seriously, Bitcoin should be able to overcome your skepticism filters, while other stuff should not be able if you apply them correctly. Specifically, shitcoin, what we call shitcoins. Many people think that we call shitcoins copies of Bitcoin that are bad because they are occasionally bad, because some bad guy decided to create a copy of Bitcoin which is not good. But that's not the case. Shitcoin is used to indicate everything for a very fundamental reason. Bitcoin is the discovery of digital scarcity. And by definition, you cannot rediscover digital scarcity because Bitcoin is the discovery that you can create a game in which some digital asset cannot be replicated. By trying to replicate in this game, you are losing what you were discovering. It's like when in the late 70s, people discovered the internet, TCP/IP. That was a way to connect all the computer network together in an open, interoperable way. Now, the internet existed as an open protocol. Everybody could use it. But now companies started to get greedy and they said, we will not use the open internet. We will recreate our own proprietary standard. So Intel, Xerox, IBM, Apple, twice with Apple Talk and Apple Talk 2, the regulators, everybody came out with a clone of the internet. For more than 15 years, we had something called the protocol wars. That was basically this company saying that internet was an old dinosaur technology going to die, and their proprietary version of the internet was the real deal. You could read a lot of newspaper in the early 90s, 91, 92, about internet being dead, with the thing that we're using right now, TCP/IP, being old dinosaur technology, already dead, and basically surpassed by these new things. With Bitcoin, it's basically the same. For about, maybe it would be again 15 years, maybe it would be a little bit more, but the idea is that you discover digital scarcity. And now there are people that are trying to rediscover the duplication of digital scarcity, but that doesn't make any sense. Bitcoin is scarce, but cryptocurrency cannot be scarce by definition because anybody can create a cryptocurrency. Now, about privacy. Since Bitcoin is scarce, is growing organically in adoption and is doing like this, a curve, and at the beginning of an S curve. If you create your shitcoin, so your copy of digital scarcity, you will grow. Maybe you will grow a lot because you will find a market niche, but you will not grow enough to compensate for this S curve. You will always stay below, especially if you grow organically, like Bitcoin, where an anonymous funder, without the company, without the marketing department, just created the software and launched it there to be adopted organically. If you try to do that, you will never grow as much as Bitcoin. So what you have to do is to find a shortcut. And the shortcut is centralization. Instead of anonymous guy creating the software, leaving it there, you will create a company with the website with the faces of the charismatic founder, and you will have a higher marketing department. It will make a partnership with Microsoft. So you're basically denying not just the scarcity thing, but also the privacy thing. You are creating so Roger Ver, when he created Bitcoin Cash, he could not leave it grow organically. He had to put his face in shilling and pushing. I'm not saying that his incarceration right now is necessarily a direct consequence of that, but there are connections to this. You cannot have privacy of the funders, for example, like Satoshi Nakamoto, because if you do a new Satoshi Nakamoto, it will disappear. Or again, since you need the shortcut, you cannot be honest about the technical trade-off. Satoshi Nakamoto could be honest and tell you, look, Bitcoin is great for this, but it's bad for this. This is solved. This is not. This is a pain point. Maybe we'll solve it someday. While shitcoiners cannot be honest, because if they are honest, the growth we still so below that all the network effect will remain with Bitcoin. So in order to pretend to grow faster, they have to oversell. They have to say all the trade-offs are magically disappeared. You know how Bitcoin struggled to be. I mean, if you make Bitcoin cheaper to send, then it becomes more expensive to receive because running a node will be more expensive. No, this trade-off is we just imagine it away with our spatial technology full of random buzzword. We solve it. Privacy in Bitcoin is hard because public keys are recorded forever on the time chain. So now privacy can be broken by analysis. No, in our system, this magically goes away. And you just put a lot of like Edward Snowden will be paid few millions to shield a privacy coin Zcash that is created by a U.S. corporation with a trademark, so they can sue you if you use it. Such a decentralization that they can sue you if you use the Zcash symbol. It's trademark, intellectual property, and with the trusted setup made by a few people that can actually hack it. So and they will shield it as private, but it is not private. You have to make compromises when you're trying to grow faster than Bitcoin. Just like IBM and Apple and Xerox and Intel, they had to make a lot of shortcuts and compromises to try to overgrow the open internet. And at the end, they lost. The network disappeared after 15 years of protocol wars. These things disappeared. There is no track of them right now, a trace of them around. And there's only what we're using now, the internet, which, by the way, it is dinosaur technology in the sense that the lower layer of the internet, the IP protocol, is frozen in time in 1983. But on top of this very old technology, new layers grew, and now we have the Zoom call, we have the streaming, we have all this beautiful stuff, which is hard to put into the internet of 1983, but we managed instead of just reinventing the wheel with a completely different protocol. So my main point would be I cannot debunk specifically right now every single claim, but be skeptical, be very skeptical. My conclusion, don't trust it, do your own research. But my conclusion after many years is focus on Bitcoin, leave all this other stuff alone.
Yeah, I love it. Bitcoin only, 100%. And I think that you really topped it off there is really gave a very good emphasis with with really the scarcity, the digital scarcity, and bringing it all together around fully to Bitcoin only, Bitcoin only, Bitcoin only. It really BTC only, like that is it. That is the standard. That is the outstanding standard. So, brother, thank you so much for all your time, your energy. If anybody wants to get a hold of you, work with you, get to know more how to connect with you, where's the best place that they could reach you? And I'll also put the links in the show notes.
Publicly, I think Twitter is still or X is still the tool I use more, even if maybe someday I will be censored because I like to be a little bit disagreeable on Twitter. So my name, Giacomo Zucco, all together on Twitter. You can check out the planb.network, which is my new project. You check it out and you can find a lot of stuff. Or you can just add me. I use a lot Telegram, not because it's good for privacy, just because it has a lot of network effect. Everybody uses Telegram, so I just capitulated and I use Telegram. Same username, Giacomo Zucco all together, my name, Giacomo Zucco, all attached, and you can find me, and I will eventually answer.
Amazing. Brother, if you had 3 days left to live, what would you do?
This is cheesy probably, but stay with the family. I have two kids, so they will be totally dedicated to them.
Not
Maybe
cheesy at
maybe
all. It's the best part.
I will save probably 5 hours to write something that I was always wanted to write about my big theory about physics and stuff, but just 5 hours. The rest of the time with the kids.
No, bro, that's the true value of our life is family, and that's what we're here for, is to take care of family. In fact, that's what we're doing every day, is taking care of our bigger global community family, and I think that's it's not cheesy at all. It's noble and it's true. So I appreciate that, and it means a lot to me, brother. Thank you for your time, bro. Thank you for everything. Is there anything that I can do for you?
No, I mean work for Bitcoin and push forward this gentle revolution, and our incentives will be aligned.